All right, welcome to Politics. I'm Hal Ginsberg, and I'm really psyched on this Passover, first day of Passover, also Earth Day, to speak to my good friend Arlen Grossman. How you doing, Arlen?
Pretty good. I'm really confused about Earth Day because some people were saying it was Saturday, but that was also 420, which had a different connotation. And then my calendar says it's today, so I'm going to assume it's today. And some people were celebrating it on Sunday, but yeah, today's the official Earth Day, I believe.
Yeah, I didn't know there were other dates that were competing with today to be Earth Day. I always just assumed it was, I always understood, let me say instead of assumed, my understanding is it's April 22nd, but you're telling me
That's
something
probably
new.
accurate. That's probably correct. Yeah.
And 420 is, yeah, the pot day, right? It's when everyone gets
Yes.
high.
Very popular all throughout the country.
Arlen, let's start with well, we're not going to just start with your stories. We're going to end with them too, although I may play at the just so listeners, viewers, I know how everyone just waits raptly for the next word that drops from my mouth or Arlen's, but just so you know, I will, if there's time, play a 48-second Earth Day video to end today's program. Otherwise, the focus is going to be on stories that Arlen hand-selected for us, curated, if you will. Let's start with the one on the screen now, Arlen. By the way, thought leader Arlen, why did you decide to choose this story?
Bill Barr is very interesting because he got into a lot of trouble with Trump's people for saying that the election numbers were off, were phony, and he kind of put a kibosh to that. So it looked like he was turning against Trump, but yet there's also a lot of evidence that he, very much was pro-Trump and maybe still is. So he's just an interesting person and hard to nail down.
Arlen, by the way, blogs at thebigpicturereport.com. Arlen, is this, I assume, and I didn't check. Usually I try to check. I've been very, very busy. I'm sorry, just preparing for today's program. I assume this is your lead link right now at thebigpicturereport.com?
I haven't posted in a few days, so I'm not totally sure, actually.
So this is from one of your favorite radio hosts, Thom Hartmann, who is still going strong. 15 years, more than that, almost 20 years since we started KRXA back in 2005, and he was on even before then. So I doff my cap to you, Thom, for having a successful media career. It's so tough, especially on the left. So it's really quite an accomplishment.
I don't know anybody that's more informed about all the issues than Thom Hartmann. He seems to have a handle on everything. He does a lot of studying, a lot of research, and he always seems to know what's going on and has a lot of information to give out that shows his point of view.
Well, rather than put Thom down, as is often my want, I'm going to give him props as well. Arlen, I read his book that you lent to me. I believe it's The Last Days or maybe The Last Hours of Ancient Sunlight. And I thought he did a tremendous job explaining the background to the climate holocaust, global warming.
Yeah, he did a great job with that. It's pretty old now, but I think it pretty much still is in effect and still matters.
Holds up. The science holds up. All right, let's get to this article. Bill Barr, he was the Attorney General, I believe, for Trump, and correct me if I'm wrong, who replaced Jefferson Sessions, whom Trump also drummed out of office, among many other appointees. So he is really excoriated. Bill Barr does get the treatment from Thom Hartmann. And Hartmann kind of goes in reverse chron order, starts with his work, Barr's, on behalf of the Trump administration, but then goes way back in time, which I appreciate, by the way. I really appreciate the history lesson. I don't like it when the focus is on Trump as some unique evil. I thought Hartmann did a nice job kind of putting Barr's career in context, whether he's fixing Trump's problems or those of predecessors like, I believe, W. Bush, and I'm not sure if he goes all the way back to Reagan. Does he go back to Reagan?
Not totally sure. He's certainly been around a long time. Yeah. Actually,
He brings up Reagan. Hartmann brings up Reagan. He brings up Iran-Contra as part of a continuing series of not just scandals, but by the GOP, illegal activities that undermined our democracy. And I truly did appreciate that, as I mentioned.
He's got a long history of being pro-Trump and very right-wing. And, like I say, about the only time that I've noticed him veering off that path was when he was questioning Trump's vote count. And he said, no, that's nonsense. Trump definitely lost the election and Biden won. And that upset a lot of his fans. But then, otherwise, he's definitely pro-Trump all the way.
Arlen, I often find myself defending Trump when I'm debating you or other Democrats. Let's just call them that. But I don't get the Trump supporters' insistence that Trump somehow was rooked out of the election. There's zero evidence. I mean, I see this so many times. People just in the teeth of proof to the contrary refuse to accept the facts. And we see that whether it's the climate change deniers and many other examples. But I really have trouble with this one where people say, oh, no, Trump really won. I don't get that one.
Well, I get it in the fact that his fans will just believe anything he says. And if he says it was stolen, then they say it's stolen. Trump had no evidence, no reason to say he won the election, but yet, he said he did, and, he was robbed, and his people just agreed with him. And, look what happened on January 6th, 2021. They all stormed the Capitol because they're sure that the election was stolen.
Well, I mean, look, we see people on the left who continue to insist in the essential veracity of Russiagate. But as much as I reject that as well, I think there's some evidence, some arguments that can be presented, but there's nothing that justifies claims that Trump somehow really did win Georgia, Arizona, Michigan. He didn't. He just didn't. And there's nothing that's even presented that sort of remotely supports the claim. So right. I'm upset by that, very much so.
Yeah, and what happened after that was Trump tried to, make things change, like in Georgia, change the votes and, fake electors and all that. He kind of, worked very hard to make it seem like he was robbed, but, there is no evidence. You're right.
So what Hartmann's, and let's be fair, I complimented his article. It's quite long. It's quite a number of words. I'm sure it's several thousand. Takes a while to get through. I didn't count them, and I didn't read every word closely, especially after the first half. But he asks this question, which I'm going to let you try to answer a little bit, Arlen, before I get to it. So Hartmann says, why didn't the Department of Justice under Bill Barr, Attorney General, proceed against, or at least investigate Trump for campaign finance violations associated with the payoff to Stormy Daniels? Michael Cohen did say, I gave her the money so she wouldn't go forward in the National Enquirer with the story that she had consensual relations with Trump. I did that of my own free will. It was my own money. Later on, he said, no, it was not my own money. It was Trump's money. So the question Hartmann asks is, in light of Cohen's flipping on Trump during Barr's term as AG, why at that point did not Barr green light investigating Trump for campaign violations, finance violations?
Well, he definitely was doing everything he could to help Trump. So that, that's not a surprise. And, there were so many other things, I think, more important than the Stormy Daniels, but that is going on right now in court in New York. And it's, pretty big thing. People are watching it. Trump has to sit through it. He's not happy to be there, but they are discussing exactly this issue.
Yeah, I mean, I think the answer why Barr didn't, I think is pretty obvious, right? I mean, he's partisan, just like any other political appointee. His job was handed to him by Trump. He has a lot of power and influence as long as he doesn't use that power and influence against his boss. And he's also a Republican. He probably ultimately prefers Trump to a Democrat, and he doesn't want to go after Trump. I could also say this isn't the most serious charge that's been levied against Trump, but look, they prosecuted Cohen. If they're going to go after Cohen, then you'd presume they'd go after the bigger fish, the biggest fish of all, for the same offense, which is violating the campaign finance law. But that said, I get it. I mean, I think we all know why he didn't do it. I highlighted there, and then I circled it in blue or squared it in blue or whatever. The guy whose run for the presidency was hanging in the balance. So that's part of the Hartmann thesis, which is that if this had come out, Trump would have lost the election. Maybe he would have. I think Trump was worried about that, right? Or else he wouldn't have. Well, he's going to say, I'm sorry, I'm talking to myself a little bit. I just want to throw this out there. Trump may argue, and maybe there's truth to it, he didn't want to embarrass Melania. He was having an affair. You pointed out last week he's having an affair with a woman while his wife was home with their newborn baby. So it wasn't so much that he was worried about losing the election. It was more that he didn't want to put his wife through that ordeal. And also he was ashamed of himself. So how do you respond to that?
Well, I agree that, I mean, I don't think that the Stormy Daniels thing was the biggest thing. I don't think if that had changed that he would have, that would change the election. I think there are bigger things that helped Trump, I think, especially Hillary Clinton, lock her up and all that. And I think that the Russians pushed a lot of that stuff too, even though a lot of you and a lot of other people don't believe it. But I think there's plenty of evidence that the Russians were trying to help Trump as best they could, and they did. But I think it's mostly people were against Hillary Clinton. Trump poisoned people against Hillary Clinton and calling her a criminal just because she lost some emails or whatever. And I think that's much more important, I think, in the final outcome than Stormy Daniels.
Yeah, I would agree, although I'll rephrase a little bit. I would agree that a much bigger factor was he was running against somebody who was like himself, unpopular, people didn't trust. And if he made folks even more mistrustful of Hillary, well, that's what a good campaign candidate does, right? I mean, you're always attacking the other side. That's
well, there's
what you
nobody
try to
like
do.
Trump. He just has this magic of being the greatest con man in history, I think, and being very persuasive, very confident, and a lot of people picked up on that and liked that, and they saw him on TV. He was a TV star, and they had a favorable impression of him. But we know there was no substance to Trump, but a lot of people didn't pick that up.
I think your point about Trump having been on TV, and I think he even has a Hollywood Walk of Fame star for his contributions to the television industry. I think that's a fair one. I think that's a good one. I mean, people kind of felt like they knew him, and he came across as this gruff, but ultimately avuncular business person, very, very successful in his show. And I think that probably was a big factor. So 100% on that, Arlen.
Yeah, I mean, people like celebrities, and he was definitely a celebrity. So, that helped him a lot, I think.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about that. So with regard to the specifics, though, about why there was no prosecution during the Trump administration by the Trump handpicked attorney general against Trump, there is evidence that I think is very interesting brought to bear by Hartmann. He cites this book, and more specifically, an attorney named Jeffrey Berman, a former U.S. attorney and Trump appointee, who writes about it. And we'll get into that next, specifically how Berman explains what went down. Do you have any comments on that, though, before we get to it?
No, I'd like to hear more about what he said and what your interpretation is, because I really hadn't heard of that before.
You were not aware of the book by Jeffrey Berman. Is that what you're
Correct.
saying? So that book came out in 2022, September. I had no recollection of the article in the Washington Post, the review of it in the Washington Post, which is cited by Hartmann. But apparently, and I'm going to guess because otherwise Hartmann wouldn't cite to it, it's very, the article is very accurate. The Washington Post article is very accurate. And so the way Hartmann describes it is exactly what's in the article. So I'm not going to the article. I'm going to go to Hartmann, but Hartmann correctly, as I read it, or identically to the Washington Post reporter, interprets Berman saying this. Berman accuses Barr of killing the investigation into Trump's role with respect to the payout to Stormy Daniels. He calls it a conspiracy to influence the 2016 election. I think that's pretty strong language, but I can't say it's inaccurate.
Probably true.
It's accurate, right? I mean, Trump was afraid he'd lose the election if the truth came out. So he was with Cohen and maybe a few others conspired to keep it from coming, including Pecker over at Inquirer. Conspiracy has to be to violate the law. The violation is we're going to change our record so that we don't have to report to the Federal Election Commission what we're doing. That's illegal. All true. And then he goes on to say Hartmann says that if Barr had not covered it up, then maybe this would have been prosecuted as soon as Biden took office. I don't know. We don't know. I mean, they never, I think that's a huge reach, Arlen, let me tell you, because even when Biden learned of it, the Justice Department didn't prosecute.
Yeah, when you think about it, though, all the things that Trump has said about, his sexual encounters, how he could, if he's a star, he could grab the woman's, P word and all that didn't kill him, didn't stop his fans from supporting him. I don't think this particular case would have done it either.
I agree, but Hartmann's the one who says it. Hartmann's the one who attributes, he flat out says it. But real quick, I also take issue with Hartmann's argument that the reason, and it seems like he's excusing the Biden administration's failure to bring this particular charge against Trump, which, by the way, I don't blame them for that. I think that they, you have so many cases you can prosecute. And like you said, I don't think this is the worst thing Trump's done. The election fraud in Georgia, to me, is the worst thing he's done. I don't really, I think there's a lot of questions about January 6th. You want to try to get the answers on, fine. Again, to me, election fraud, trying to change the results of a Democratic election is really, really evil. Also, what they did to the immigrants in immigration camps was really evil by Trump.
But don't forget the Mar-a-Lago case where he's took all those official documents and hid them and pretended he didn't have them and tried to, hide them and put them in his bathroom. And I mean, that would be easy, I think, to prove that he is guilty. But again, that's going to be probably put off.
Have they charged him? He has been charged with that, right? The conversion of records. Well, he should be. I agree. It's not one of these cases where he said, just come and get him, or you're right, I have him, or what do you need back, or anything. He dodged and tried every which way to keep the records from being divulged. So I agree. I think all of those are more serious than this.
And I'd like to
if Daniels had accused him of rape, I would feel differently, because then I would feel like he was covering up a violent crime. But that's not the case here. But I'm just making the point that, to me, a violent sexual crime would change this pretty dramatically. And only, remember, our focus is just on the Stormy Daniels payout and what arose from it.
I got to wonder, though, what did he do with all those documents? Why did he want them? He's not the type that likes to read. So you got to think that it's possible that he did something in which he would, make some money from or give to people, other countries that shouldn't have them. I'd like to see that come out, because that could really be devastating against Trump.
Well, one plausible explanation I've heard, Arlen, is he really didn't know what was in a lot of the records. He was hoping he might get some dirt on political enemies. That to me seems most plausible, knowing Trump and his record.
That sounds possibly likely too. Yeah.
All right. So we've got Arlen with us. It is Politics. Please click like. Please click subscribe. We love doing this for you, but I love doing it more when I know I have lots and lots of viewers, which I unfortunately don't know. I wish I did. But you can click the like, and I'm going to see if I can get that subscribe button. Arlen, I love my subscribe button. So let's see if we can get that out there for you. Oh, it just went right over my Halotix blue there. It should be on. It should have been to the right. There you go. Now we got it up there. So now, the feds. The thing is, maybe the feds don't view this as seriously as Hartmann does. That may be why they didn't go as far as he had hoped, as Hartmann had hoped, which is to push the case more aggressively. And they were looking at other charges. Hartmann says that this is real corruption. Again, I hate to say it, Arlen, I think he's kind of making more of it than maybe I would. All that said, I thought he did a real nice job pointing out that this is all part and parcel of Barr's record and the Republican Party's over the past decade. So here he provides examples of Republican misdeeds, crimes in the past, going back to Nixon. Some of these I didn't really realize. Nixon cut a deal with South Vietnam to prolong the war. Were you aware of that? I did not know that, Arlen.
Yes. I think that's what got Nixon elected.
So very shades of Reagan, right? Reagan keeping the hostages imprisoned so that he would definitely have that as an issue to beat Jimmy Carter over the head with.
Sure, that seems to have gone on in a lot of Republican campaigns, and it's pretty frightening that they got away with it.
It's very upsetting. Also, the purging. So how did they do that purging of he says 94,000 black people. It probably was a lot of people different, probably whites, Latinos as well, but maybe a focus on African Americans. That was, they would send postcards, and if they weren't responded to right away, they would just write them off the rolls.
Well, unfortunately, that's going on today in many, many states. They're looking for ways to, get Democratic likely voters, off the voter list. And, they're seeming to get away with it a lot. And it's very unfortunate, because it could make a difference in this coming election if there's not everybody gets a chance to vote.
Well, that's for sure true. I think studies have so far been equivocal on whether GOP efforts have really made a difference in elections. There may have been a couple in the South. I don't know whether it'll make a difference in the Electoral College. But they certainly are trying to make it harder for people who tend to vote Democratic to vote versus those who vote Republican. I always think of those examples in Texas where a gun license is considered a Texas issued gun license is sufficient identification, but a state issued University of Texas student ID is not.
Yeah, and I think it's, I think the worst part of it is that the Supreme Court is not going to be able to help out these people who are being whose votes are being taken away in certain states, because the Supreme Court just keeps their hands off it and says it's up to the states. And I think that's wrong.
Far from helping, they're, if anything, going to harm the cause of democracy.
Sure.
And we see democracy really struggling right now. It's very, very troubling in all sorts of ways. But before we get to this, well, let me put this up, because this relates to my question, Arlen, which is going to be a little bit of putting you on the spot, I think, where Hartmann, that is, and this is all from his article, he describes Barr as representing the old GOP, which commits crimes while wearing $2,000 tailored suits and manipulating the law to their advantage, much as Republicans do today. He also points out perverts like Matt Gaetz and racist rhetoric against immigrants as more the province of the new GOP. But I don't think that's really fair. The old GOP also trafficked in racist rhetoric. Remember, Ronald Reagan began his 1980 campaign, I believe, speaking at a Confederate cemetery, and also went to a Nazi concentration camp at one point and spoke there. So I don't think it's just the current GOP that is guilty of these sins.
No, it isn't just the current one. That's been that way for many, many years, as we know, and they've gotten away with it. They've won elections despite not having the popular vote. They've won elections, and those things help them win those elections.
Well, if that's all true, Arlen, and I think we agree, then how is Trump some unique evil who's done grievous injury to what appears to me an already wounded animal that is our democracy?
Well, I think, other Republican presidential candidates at least pretended to be for democracy. I don't think Trump even bothers to do that. He seems to go along with the authoritarian rule. He likes, the people in other countries that are authoritarians. He seems to be favorable to Putin. So Trump's, I think, in a class by himself, in my opinion.
All right. Again, not to defend Trump. I think you make very fair points. But just to push back a little bit longer, in terms of presidents cozying up to dictators and tyrants, I was even thinking of, Democrats who've done the same thing, where former President Obama greeting Modi, right, who's a demagogue, who's, committing pogroms against Muslims in India, greeting him with a hug in New York shortly after Obama left office. Hillary Clinton working closely with authoritarians in, I believe, Honduras, where there was a coup that overturned a democratic socialist in favor of a right-wing military leader. And she helped bring that about. So, and it's not just Democrats, right? I mean, we certainly know Pinochet in Chile is a perfect example of that when Nixon was president. But I guess I'm going back to, I think it just seems like anything we complain about Trump seems like we can point to examples of other presidents doing.
Yeah, it's been our foreign policy for decades. It's been that way. We've done some really terrible things and gotten involved with very terrible leaders. But I think Trump just takes it to a newer level, in my opinion. And he doesn't even pretend to be pro-democracy.
Well, again, to your point, the effort to reverse the results of the 2020 election were extraordinarily serious.
Very, very. And that's never happened before, just like an ex-president has never actually gone to trial like an ex-president is right now. So, yeah, there's a lot of historic new things happening right now. And, Trump is definitely, right there in the middle.
So we agree that Trump poses a very significant danger. I don't know if I call him unique, but I think there are certain examples in his past that are somewhat unique. We already touched on this. I'm going to get back to it. I want to get back to this though, but just to confirm, this is again from Hartmann. So I want to just be clear where I took this. I just cut it and pasted it. Hartmann writes that this crime, referring to the payoff to Daniels, the hush money, turned the 2016 election to Trump. Without it, polling shows and political sciences argue Hillary would have been our president. So I mentioned this to you before we went on air. This struck me because there's no source for it. There's no citation. I didn't feel like Googling it to try to find out what he was talking about, to be honest. Maybe I should have. But I think if you're going to make a statement that this was dispositive, remember there were a lot of other factors, Arlen. For example, we haven't mentioned was it the Comey laptop story where he revealed that Huma Abedin's ex-husband, then husband at the time, had had her emails on that laptop. That was a pretty big story and that came out just a couple of weeks before the election. People have argued that may have moved the needle. I'll get to some others. I feel like Hartmann weakens. I would like to have seen some citation. I'm not going to accept this on faith.
Yeah, no, I will agree with you on that. I think there's so many things that were more important than this. I mean, a sex scandal involving Donald Trump just doesn't seem like that big of a deal. But I think, as I said before, I think it's Hillary Clinton that's the, the difference. He made people hate Hillary Clinton. He really pushed really hard at making her seem like an evil, person who's stealing state secrets and all that kind of thing, and it worked, I think. So yeah, one more sex scandal like this one is not the difference. I agree.
I want to get to what I think was the cause of the two biggest factors, and I actually wrote about this, but I think it's germane when we talk about Hartmann to go back into why Trump won, or to discuss why Trump won. I don't disagree with you that Hillary, his opponent, was a very, very important factor. No question, Arlen, but I don't think he made Hillary detested. I mean, people didn't like her. She's just not liked. I mean, it's not because of Trump. He might have pushed people away from her, but she does a good job of that herself. For example, Trump tried to argue that Obama wasn't born in this country, and I'm sure some people believe that. But it didn't make people hate Obama. People like Obama. Now, I have my problems with Obama. There's a lot of things I don't like about Obama. But the fact is, Trump can't make you like or hate somebody without their help.
Well, people do listen very much to whatever Trump says. And, to some people, he's almost like a god, and they believe everything he says. So, whatever he says makes a difference for a lot of people.
I think it's important that we examine what are the factors that could have caused a demagogue like Trump, somebody who really doesn't respect democracy clearly and is a blowhard. And even, before 2016, we knew he, floated a completely fabricated story that President Obama wasn't an American, even though he most certainly is American. And that's just one example. I can't, he was a game show host, a blowhard, no question. So why would people support a person like Trump? And because of my respect for the electorate as an aggregate, not individual voters, but as an aggregate, I think there were some very legitimate reasons. This is from the University of Minnesota. It struck me as soon as it came out, about a year after, less than a year after the election, did the Bush-Obama wars cost Clinton the White House? And these two professors at very prestigious schools, well, guess what? They say yes. They say, I think hope you can read this. America's war continuously for 15 years. Vast majority of citizens, so like you and me, Arlen, right? We have no direct connection to those citizens, soldiers fighting. But they explored whether in the communities that really were at war, relatively high percentage of soldiers from those communities, how did they vote? And it's very, very instructive that the three states that Trump won the election in, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, had among the highest rates of service in those wars. That they had a very, very disproportionate, they were paying a disproportionate price for the wars. And that they conclude that this was a significant factor.
Well, there are lots of factors that certainly could be one of them. That those kind of things make a difference. Who's dying, who's wounded, who are the victims of all these wars.
And the Democrats were not good about bringing them home. Just not that W didn't start it. He did, and he was worse. But remember, Trump spoke, he criticized Bush for the Iraq War. And the reason I also bring this up is because I think it has resonance for today's election, or the election that we're discussing today, that will be November. Politicians from both parties would do well to recognize and address the needs of the communities whose young women and men are making the ultimate sacrifice for the country. So, and he also says Trump should remain highly sensitive to American combat casualties. Do you think, because I think there's examples of both of those. Do you think that's happened at all?
Well, of course, the Republicans were very smart in not, getting a universal draft that involved everybody. So it's only volunteers that are the ones that are possible victims. So, that makes a difference, and it maybe doesn't, push that up to the top. But I'll tell you what worries me the most, Hal. Even if Trump loses, I worry about the Democratic Party and what they're going to have to face in the coming years unless they make some important changes. And I know you agree with me on that. That they have to do something a lot different, because there's just a lot of people who will still be there even if Trump loses, that are going to be, with him, with the Trump type MAGA people.
Oh, 100%, Arlen. I think the Democrats do need to do a much better job reaching out to all poor, struggling, and working class Americans, many of whom supported Trump. And now we're seeing, at least according to studies, a higher percentage, not a majority, but a higher percentage of working class people of color seem to be supporting Trump.
Yeah, they're going to have, the Democrats are going to have to get some younger people in there. Obviously, Joe Biden's not going to be the one that's going to make any major changes, as well as the other older ones. So you got to have some young, dynamic people leading the Democratic Party. I don't know who those people will be, but we've got to find them.
Well, you anticipated my question, but since you say you don't know, I'm not sure how. Real quick, I mean, we're not going to focus on the story, but I shared with you some news about AOC finally giving money to the DCCC. You support it. I'm completely opposed to that decision by her. But do you think that was done consciously, wittingly by her to try to solidify, shore up support within the party for her, and therefore pave the way for her to become a national figure?
Well, she's very smart, and she's smart enough to know that she can't totally divorce herself from the the major part of the Democratic Party. She's got to be part of the system too, even though she could push against it in her own way. But I got to tell you something else, Hal. I was watching 60 Minutes on Sunday, and they had a terrific segment about this Commerce Secretary who's a possible a woman named Raimundo, I think it is.
Gina Raimondo. Yeah, she's former, I believe, governor of Rhode Island.
Correct. And yeah, so she certainly looks very good, and definitely is the kind of person that I think the Democrats need. To run.
I'm going to disagree with you on Gina Raimondo. She comes from Wall Street. I believe it was Salomon Brothers before they went kaput. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it was Morgan Stanley, but she was definitely associated with a very big investment bank. And one of her actions as governor of Rhode Island was to move billions of Rhode Islanders' pension money into privately managed funds, as opposed to the state-run funds, which had much lower costs. And that certainly was perceived at the time, and I think correctly, as a kind of a gift to her former Wall Street colleagues. So that kind of centrism, corporatism, whatever you call it, I think would go over very, very badly when it's more widely exposed, which it will be. It's interesting to me that the corporate media, she's been a darling. They love her. Washington Post really likes Gina Raimondo. But if you look into her record, I think you might find some pretty ugly, corrupt stuff going on in there.
Yeah, you know more about her than I do. You're being on the East Coast, and I know very little about her. So, your points are very well taken. Her defense was that she's really going after a lot of these major corporations and putting pressure on them to, to do certain things and making them uncomfortable too. But yeah, I think if she's not really part of, the progressive part of the Democratic Party, then I probably wouldn't support her either.
Well, I'd like to see more about from her because I did a very, very quick Google search on her, and it does seem, based on what I'm looking at real quick, there's some things there I like in terms of focusing on Chinese abuse of our data. I'd have to look into all of that, but I'm very skeptical of her, and I have not followed her recently. So to give you your due, maybe there's been a sea change. Maybe her focus of late has been very different than what I'm aware of in the past. But
well, you know how
it would take a lot for me to come around to her.
You know, if she really wants to be president, she obviously realizes she's going to have to go to the left a little bit more to get some of the progressive interested in her and liking her. So then she may be turning in that direction. I don't know her that well, but I hope she is anyway.
Yeah, I'm just looking at a new article an article came out in a progressive group, golocalprov.com. So that's Providence. Wall Street Friends. Let's see if I can show it real quick, because this goes to what I was complaining about with regard to Raimondo, and I think that this is our media not really. And I'm not saying what she's done is commerce or focus on Asia, on abuse by our foreign competitors isn't really important, but I think so much we learn. There's so many things we don't learn from our corporate media, and that's a big problem too. So there's just the whole art. This is from Go Local Prov. Wall Street Friends of Gene R. Giddy to get millions from Rhode Island Pension Fund for doing absolutely nothing. So again, that goes to the issue I was just mentioning. So I'm skeptical, and that just came out. That's Dateline yesterday, Arlen. So it isn't from 8 years ago or something. I'm just skeptical whether her loyalties are with the American people or with Wall Street.
Yeah, well, you're very right to wonder about that, and I don't know the answer.
Okay, so let's just get to the other issue that I believe drove, besides, and I'm not saying it wasn't that Comey story, the Comey investigating the email that Weiner, I guess it was Anthony Weiner, right? I said Anthony Weiner's. I'm not saying it wasn't that too. That was very relevant, but
I think it was more to it than that. Hell, I don't think it was the Weiner thing that did it. It was just that he came out just days before the election. And
I agree. The timing was really suspect, wasn't it? It was clearly an October surprise.
He blew it, I think. I don't think.
Yeah, it was very serious. It was significant, and you saw a significant drop in the polling for Clinton right after the story dropped. Her numbers also dropped. But this is from 538, which is far from a Trumpist type periodical. And here you have Ben Castleman, who says, no, it was economics. And people say, well, Trump bamboozles them, and he this and he that. But he also makes the point that there was a very close correlation between place and vote, just like the areas that were hardest hit by our endless war voted for Trump disproportionately. Likewise, counties where free trade, so-called free trade, globalization had been particularly harmful, also went to Trump. So Trump won most counties where a large share of jobs are vulnerable to outsourcing or automation. So that's pretty powerful stuff, because he was talking about trade, he was talking about tariffs throughout 2015, 2016. I would like the Democratic Party to get that message. I think they did to an extent, Arlen.
Well, I think people tend to make things seem like they were better in the past, when actually there were a lot of problems when Trump was president, especially, when COVID hit and he pretended it didn't exist and it was a Democratic hoax. So, there were a lot of things that Trump, was very wrong about, but people kind of tend to forget those things.
Oh, no question. I'm just talking about factors that might have helped him in 2016 beat Clinton. And so the endless war probably helped him. We already mentioned the Comey story that dropped just 2 weeks before the election. Also, the damage, the sections of the country that have been most hard hit by so-called quote, free, unquote, trade. And here again, Trump did especially well among voters without a college degree, whose prospects have been shrinking. So a lot of economic anxiety that really redounded to Trump's benefit. And Trump is playing that card now. And this is why I was a little frustrated. And we got another story. I got Arlen here. I'm doing a lot of the chattering here, Arlen. I apologize for that. But these are my issues. And economics, even what's his name? Carville said it's the economy, stupid. And Trump gets it. Here he is last month, pledges to get tough with tariffs again if elected. And finally, so I'm not letting you talk, I promise to. This is what got me so, this is what frustrates me about Hartman loves tariffs. Hartman's been a huge supporter of tariffs. Why couldn't Hartman say, hey, I don't like Trump, but he's right about tariffs? And maybe has he said that? I don't watch his program. I haven't heard him say that.
Yeah, I'm not sure why that's that important, but
because of jobs, because of all those people who are losing their jobs or having their wages suppressed because of the threat of foreign competition.
Well, I like to think that Biden is trying to fix that, and has some. I think he's had some success in getting more manufacturing jobs going. So, that'll help. But, I think what's going to be...
I think that you're right. Let me just interrupt you. You're right. Yeah. He has not repealed the Trump tariffs. As a matter of fact, I think the economy has done decently under Biden, maybe better than, arguably, possibly, definitely better than it would have under Trump. I wish he would give that message out more. I don't think he calls it Bidenomics, but I think he needs to be more specific, Arlen.
Well, he's trying. I mean, it's hard for him to get the kind of publicity that Donald Trump gets. So not everybody knows what he's saying. But he spent 3 days in Pennsylvania because he knew how important that state is. And, but I think what's going to be really important now is how Trump gets through this trial, because he's really struggling. He's really feeling a lot of pressure. You could see it in his face, in the way he talks, the way he looks. He seems like he's aged. I think that might be a major factor if this, trial keeps going on and he gets more and more frustrated and feeling more and more pressure.
I haven't really been looking into the way Trump looks, but I gotta believe you're absolutely right. Very stressful to be under trial. He could lose. I think he probably will lose. The evidence is very strong against him. He already lost before another New York jury with the E. Jean Carroll case. This isn't good for him at all. And the polling has him dead heat. I know everyone's always, there's a lot of bedwetting or whatever term you want to use among Democrats, but I've been saying for months, and I know you have, that you think Trump will win, that you think Trump will lose and Biden will win.
Yeah, I just think, Trump is just losing it. I think it's, this kind of, he's never been in a position like he is right now where he has to sit still and not talk and has to be there. And, all these kind of things are new to him and very much what he's not used to. He's always gotten away with everything, but now he's not getting away with what he would like to get away with. And the judge is the one in charge here, not Trump.
That's a great point. Trump is he's I don't know what the word is, opposition defiance disorder. I'm not sure what he has, but he cannot take not being in charge. And that's why I was thinking he could get a contempt citation, and I would if I were the judge, because he's clearly he's flouted the judge's authority.
It's pretty tough, for the judge to put Trump in jail. I mean, that would just, turn everything up on end. I mean, his supporters would go crazy. So the judge is likely not going to do that. I think a lot of money fines would mean something to Trump, if he made it, millions of dollars for contempt, but I don't know if that's possible or not.
I think it's fair what you said about the risk of locking Trump up even for, a few hours for contempt. It could redound to Trump's benefit. He might get some sympathy, at least in the media. And I think it also could arguably give grounds for an appeal. And I think that the judge would be very, very afraid of that, very leery of giving any grounds for an appeal. Now, you would normally put someone behind bars over the, at a time when the jury doesn't know. You're going to do it out of the hearing of the jury. You're not going to do any of that, but it still could impact on a finding of whether Trump got a fair trial. Well, I think he's clearly getting a fair trial. I don't have any reason to believe otherwise. Let me play this real quick, Arlen, and it's not just about Trump. I do think it's instructive that Trump's economic policy has followed Hartmann's prescription, but I'm really playing this because I want Democrats to hear this and recognize that they've got to take into account the plight of working people if they don't want our country to slide into fascism.
Want to debate free trade with me?
A little bit, actually. You keep talking about how, or at least you did earlier, about how America should back out of all of our free trade agreements and start leveraging heavy tariffs like we did pre-Reagan.
Yes.
It seems like you're operating under the assumption that we have all the bargaining power in the world economy. A very quick example of what would more than likely happen is, let's say we back out of free trade and we start leveraging heavy tariffs on China for all the goods we get from China for Walmart and computers and everything. And in response, China says, okay, we're cutting all rare earth metal exports to America, and we're leveraging a tariff on all exports of rare earth metal products made in China heading to America.
Right.
And they have a near monopoly on rare earth metals, which are used in everything.
Well,
from
yes
computers
and
to cars.
yes and no, David. Check your history. They have a near monopoly right now on the production
A little snide, but fair.
of rare earth metals. But do you know where the largest rare earth metals mine in the world is right now? It's in California. It's in California. It's just not operating. And the reason it's not operating, they closed it about 11 years ago, and they closed it because the Chinese are mining and refining rare earths and selling them so cheaply that the rare earth mine in California could not compete with them. But we have those resources here, and we just need to reactivate them. In fact, that mine in California, last year, there was legislation before Congress to reactivate that mine and help the federal government subsidize it to operate at a loss because there were some Republicans pushing this pretty seriously because they were looking at a time when we may actually be in a war with China. And right now, we can't make a computer chip for a cruise missile without some of the rare earths coming from China. And they're looking at that going, wait a minute, China might be the military power that we fight next, and we can't make a missile without their parts? That's crazy.
So there's where I think the relevance comes in, because you were asking why they matter so much. And I think Hartmann did a real nice job, Arlen, connecting our national security interests, our economic interests with raising the cost of goods that we import from China.
That's an interesting story, which I knew nothing about it. I wonder where in California that mine is.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that either, but I thought it was really relevant. Also goes to the Gina Raimondo story that you brought up, because she has been very focused on bringing tech back to the United States, which I appreciate. Okay, so I criticize her for her Wall Street ties and some of her actions, but that's a good one. That's a good thing. But again, I'm just making the point that I think the media needs to try, especially the left media, to try to be fair. And here Trump has adopted a policy that clearly is consistent, jibes with what Hartmann's been calling for over 10 years. I think Hartmann should acknowledge that. And he may have. So I may be unfair arguing there. One other point, Arlen, since there was a pregnant pause, and I give you credit for this too, for champion Hartmann. I don't really give you credit. I give Hartmann credit for it, but you're right to champion, because I think a lot I've learned, and I never liked Thom Hartmann's program. There's a little smarminess to it, like what he said. What did he say to the guy? There was something he said in there that I paused, where he came across as somewhat, I thought, snotty, but I never liked that about him. But what I learned about the anthropogenic global warming, and also I think my strong views on tariffs do derive. I can't prove that in my own head, but my strong views on tariffs, I think, in part, were formed by Thom Hartmann's commentaries.
I don't think there's anybody that is more informed about everything than Thom Hartmann. He seems to know something about everything, or a lot about a lot of things. And so, he's somebody I go to first when I want to know what I believe is probably going to be the truth and historically accurate.
Well, another person that you go to quite a bit, and you've told me this, so I'm not speaking out of school or trying to, be cute, is Nick Kristof of the New York Times. And I think I actually mentioned this story first, but I know you read it as well and were taken by it. So what are your takeaways from this? What happened to the Joe Biden I knew by Nick Kristof?
Well, I think Kristof is saying, knowing what Biden knows about what's going on with all the civilian casualties in Gaza and all the terrible things and the starvation and all that Joe Biden tolerates it because, Joe Biden, says it's, he tries to convince Netanyahu to do otherwise, but ultimately the only real strength that he has is, the amount of money and the amount of weapons that he sends to Israel. And for some reason, Joe Biden will not go there. And then that's a shame because that's the only leverage that Joe Biden has. And he's willing to let Netanyahu have the advantage in this case.
Well, Kristof makes the point, which I'm not going to contest here, although I do question, that Biden was good, not just better than he is now, but actually really a good, kind person who is truly concerned about crimes like genocide. And he's changed, or he's not acting the way he used to act, like as he did in response to the Sudan crisis, Darfur crisis. Could part of the reason for that be, Kristof doesn't bring this up, but it struck me, Arlen, he's old. He's an old man, and the cognitive decline, he's not fully processing it. It's also harder as you age, I think, to change course, right? It's harder to sort of see things differently than you have. He's always perceived Israel as an ally. He's known Bibi for 25 years at least, 30 years. Does his age make it harder for him to change?
I don't know anything about old age, as you probably know, Hal, but
well, from your own direct experiences, which are completely relevant to this conversation, Arlen.
But I'm sure that's a factor, and I think Biden's always been pro-Israel. He counts on the Jewish vote, and he's always been friends with Netanyahu. So. But he's wrong in this case. I think Biden needs to do more to put pressure on the Israeli leader because it's going pretty bad over there in Gaza, and Israel is looking very bad and losing a lot of friends. And I think Biden could change the course if he would put some pressure on Netanyahu.
34,000 dead now, according to the Palestinian authorities, over 34,000 dead. A gruesome story, mass grave, shades of the Nazi Holocaust mass grave found at the Khan Yunis hospital. I believe Al-Shifra is the name of that hospital. The Israelis have pulled back, and when the Hamas and the Palestinian authorities were able to go back to that area, they found this mass grave where the Israelis had just thrown a bunch of bodies. And Israel had said, well, they were Hamas fighters. They were all Hamas fighters. But in fact, they found corpses that were in casts, that had other medical devices that had been were attached to them, or that you could see had been attached, like IV units and the like, which clearly belies the argument that these were fighters. Fighters aren't, sitting in hospital beds with casts. They're not strapped up to IV units.
Israel used to be
it's really terrible.
It is very terrible. And I think, Israel had a lot of support because of, the situation that they're in, being, all by themselves in the Middle East. But they're ruining their reputation by doing all this, by, looking like they're just more interested in just taking over Gaza rather than letting the people there live and make their own decisions. So it's very bad public relations for Israel, and it needs to change.
Are you surprised, Arlen, at what appears to be, and we are both Jewish, at least by birth, if not by observation. Are you surprised by what appears to be pretty solid Jewish support for Israel? And I know there are exceptions. I'm certainly one of them. But when I talk to Jewish people, I'm always struck by how defensive they are, how prepared they are to make excuses for alibi for Israel. Has that been your experience, A? And B, if so, are you surprised by that?
Well, I think there is a pushback against Israel and against Netanyahu. There's the J Street is a pretty big organization, I think, that's pro-peace. So I would like, and over in Israel, there's been a lot of demonstrations, tens of thousands of people who are against Netanyahu, and his poll levels are very low. So, I think there's a little bit of both going on.
Arlen, I had flagged earlier the was it 538 or no? It was the University of Minnesota article that discusses casualties of war and how that may have helped the numbers of casualties in certain communities, caused those communities to perhaps vote for Trump over Clinton in 2016. Do you think, and that's why I circled this, Biden has not sent American troops. The two wars that he seems to really be behind are Ukraine and Israel. And in both of them, you could call them proxy wars, or you could say we're supporting allies, depending on how you feel about them. Either way, American lives are not being put at risk. We're not seeing body bags. Is that a lesson that maybe 2016 did teach both parties? If you want to win, don't commit Americans to battle, especially in wars that could quickly become unpopular.
Yeah, I think that is certainly the consensus now, that it would be a major mistake if the U.S. troops got involved in any of these wars. They've got the Ukraine, if they give them the support and the money that they seem to have done this week, that'll help Ukraine keep the fight going. And as far as in Israel, certainly can take care of itself, militarily. So it would be stupid for us to, go in there and try to take over, their fighting. So Biden's playing it correctly right now.
All right, Arlen, we're coming up on the end. We're actually past the hour mark. So I don't think I want to go to another story. I did think your gambling story was very interesting, and I have discussed gambling, but we're getting towards the Pesach dinner for me, so I really can't continue. But I guess I would like you to maybe just, and I've made the defense for Biden, I think, is that if he, in terms of the Israel policy, where he's all in for Israel, I really can't defend more military support for Israel. He's been pushing for it. He continues to push for it. He says he's disappointed. He wrings his hands at what Israel's doing, but he hasn't called for any concrete response. Could he, in other words, could he politically, or is he just in too tight a spot where he could lose the support he needs to win re-election?
Well, I'd like to see him, make a difference in the amount of, money and weapons that he sends. Maybe send a little bit less, still, show that he supports Israel, but, start, ratcheting it down a little bit, the support that he has been giving Netanyahu, and maybe that would help.
All right, before we go, Arlen, I promised everyone I will play this video here from Earth Day 2024. It's kind of interesting. It kind of struck me because the focus is on plastics, and we all know how bad plastics are for the environment, but I didn't think that was going to be kind of the topic. But apparently the Earth Day topic this year is plastics, and that certainly goes to also global warming because plastics are a petroleum product. Petroleum-based. But before we get to that, Arlen, any final words for you, and then we'll go out with Earth Day 2022.
What was that movie where Dustin Hoffman was in, and they said, what's the secret? And he said, somebody said, plastics. That's what you got to know. What was it called?
Wow, The Graduate.
Graduate, right, The Graduate. So I think that's interesting.
Arlen, that's funny you mention it. I'm going to, usually I give you the last word when I say, well, but now I'm not. It's funny that you mentioned that because I think of you when I think of The Graduate, because the movie, first of all, I think it was about your time. You're a little young, but still that's your wheelhouse. A, and B, Southern California, you grew up, I believe, outside LA, and I think that's exactly where The Graduate is set.
Yeah, I thought it was maybe the Bay Area, but I'm not sure.
No, he goes up to the Bay Area. He goes to Cal because his girlfriend, who later becomes his wife at the end, Catherine Ross, he being Dustin Hoffman character, he drives up to the Bay Area. But if you watch at the very beginning of the movie, when he's coming home from college, he's on his airplane, and the PA says, "We are now approaching Los Angeles International Airport."
Well, I grew up in West Los Angeles, in Culver City specifically, so I certainly am aware of what it was.
Did you ever date Catherine Ross by any chance?
Let me think for a second.
Who was Mrs. Robinson, the actor? Anne Bancroft.
No, I had no personal experience with either one.
All right, that will be your last word, Arlen. Mine too. Here's our Earth Day video. Oh, you know what I stopped doing? No one really cares. I stopped playing the videos from YouTube. I actually have to record them because I have so much trouble when I just play them straight off YouTube. It's always an issue. Now, did I even have my Earth? Looks like I don't. Wow, this is so annoying. I've got everything but my Earth Day video. All right, we'll just...
I see a play button there. You could try.
I know, but that's just a play button of a...
commercial.
It's a picture of a play button. It's not the actual.
Okay.
It's not the...
Next try.
I'll get it for us. You see, I can't do that. Once I actually say I'm going to show something, I do have to. So I'll throw it in there through YouTube. Oh, that's not good. Let's get out of there.
Next week. How about
here? All my little tricks, Arlen. I'm opening up my bag of tricks for everybody. Let's see if they've got that plastics video here somewhere. This is you're just folks are gonna have to bear with me because I want to get that video up if I possibly can. The official, let's see, here it is, the official site. Yeah, tell us what you want. No, I don't want to do that. All right, so here we go. Look at this. I think we're gonna get there. It's gonna. And I'm looking off to the side. Not the best, but let's see. So here we go. Just about. We're getting close. I really wanted to show it because I'm a big enviro. I'm an enviro, and I want to show it. So Earth Day. We'll do it like this. And all the little tricks. All right, now unmute. Here we go. All right, folks, that'll do it for Arlen and me. We'll see you next week.